clock at 6. Horry for 3. Robert Horry with the shot clock running down.
Now they have Prince on Ginobili, Hunter on Parker. Here's Ginobili. Oh, they to Horry for 3. Oh, unbelievable. This guy is off the charts.
If we measured players strictly off of championships, Robert Horry would be one of the greatest of all time. But we don't. Yet the legacy of some of the players who do fall under the greatest of all time category would look a lot different if not for Big Shot Bob. No matter where Robert Horry went in his 16-year career, winning followed. Time after time, he hit the biggest shot in the most critical moment, and his legend grew as the years went on. And while it's a fact that Robert Horry is one of the most clutch players in sports history, his big-time shots have overshadowed his overall impact as a player, as winning basketball was present in every facet of his game, from his early days as a Swiss Army knife in Houston to his final years as a spot-up shooter and post defender in San Antonio. And no matter how much his role was reduced as he got older, if Robert Horry's number was called, he was going to be ready.
He does it all the time. He's really sneaky about it. He comes in and he does it. It's not like once in a while. It's consistent. You know, that's Robert for you.
Let's jog your memory. Born in Maryland, Robert Horry would move to Andalusia, Alabama, where he would eventually attend Andalusia High School. And in his 4 years as a Bulldog, Horry grew to 6'8", and by the time he was a senior, the general consensus was that he was the top high school prospect in the state of Alabama. And while he had many colleges hoping to land the versatile big man, he would stay home and attend Alabama, as it was his mom's favorite. So the Crimson Tide signed one of the best prospects and didn't have to go far to find him. Playing time was hard to come by for Horry in the beginning of his '89 freshman season, with Alabama head coach Wimp Sanderson calling on Horry early to improve his intensity. But as everyone would find out later in his career, his calm and collected demeanor shouldn't be mistaken for a lack of a competitive drive. But as the season went on, Horry continued to force his way into a larger role with great play, as Sanderson learned quickly that Horry needed to get minutes whenever he could. And near the end of the year, Horry had even worked his way into the starting lineup for a Tide team who went 23-8 and won the SEC tourney, as they would get an NCAA tournament berth but lose to South Alabama in the first round, with Horry putting up 7 points and 6 boards, as his freshman season ended with him averaging about 6.5 points, 5 rebounds, and a block per game. With Alabama losing 2 starters to graduation, Horry found himself in the starting lineup as a top forward for the team. But he wasn't the only one, as Alabama's front court was stacked, with Horry playing alongside junior Melvin Cheatham and senior David Benoit, as well as sixth man Keith Askins. The Tide featured one of the nation's top defenses in 1990, and Horry was a big reason for that, as his combination of size, mobility, and athleticism made him one of the best defenders in the conference, as he would lead the team in both steals and blocks, while also finishing second in scoring and rebounding. And early in the season, Sanderson would move around the lineup, so Horry could spend more time on the perimeter, as his versatility extended to his range, shooting nearly 43% from deep this season. And Alabama was looking good, with big wins over ranked opponents in North Carolina and LSU, as they would ultimately finish the regular season at 21-8. Then in the conference tourney they would dominate, defeating Mississippi State, then Auburn, and finally Ole Miss, by an average victory margin of 16 points. As they had won 6 straight entering the NCAA tournament, Horry put the team on his back in a first-round win over Colorado State, as he dropped 27 points while going 6 of 8 from deep, setting up a second-round matchup with Arizona. And although Horry was held to 8 points, a huge second half from Alabama led to an easy victory and a trip to the Sweet 16. And although Horry put up 21 points, 2 steals, and 3 blocks, Alabama lost to an inspired Loyola Marymount team to end their year, as Horry's sophomore season had seen him average about 13 points, 6 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game. Alabama would add some firepower going into the '91 season, as they would welcome freshman guard James Hollywood Robinson and bring in a JUCO transfer named Latrell Sprewell, as Horry would return to playing mostly down low as Alabama's best inside presence. And while he would see production drops on the offensive end, he continued to be one of the conference's best defenders, as he would tie for the team lead in steals, while finishing second in the conference in blocks. Alabama was a more balanced team, as although their defense had taken a hit after losing some top players, their offense improved, as they would start the season as the number 7 ranked team in the nation, yet would drop 3 of their first 5. And while they would get back on track as the season went on, they didn't quite look as good as Horry's first 2 years. But then the SEC tournament came, and it was time to show who was king, except it looked like they would be without Horry, as Sanderson would suspend him indefinitely for unspecified attitude issues, as they got by Florida with a close win in the quarterfinals. But it ended up being a brief suspension, as Horry was back for the semis, and Alabama ran through Auburn, then did the same to Tennessee, to win their 3rd straight conference title, earning them another automatic bid to the tournament, as they would get Murray State in round 1, and Horry would put up an efficient 21 points while blocking 2 shots in a win. Then they got Wake Forest in round 2, and Horry would chip in 16 points in another tied win, as the Sweet 16 brought the Arkansas Razorbacks. And while Horry was the Tide's best player, finishing with 18 points and 11 rebounds, Alabama lost in a rout to end their season, as Horry's year had ended with him averaging about 11.5 points, 8 rebounds, and 2.5 blocks per game. Alabama had one of the nation's best trios in 1992, as Sprewell had a much larger role as a senior. But Horry also put together his best season this year, as he would record career highs across the board, finishing as the team's leading rebounder and top 3 in the SEC in that category, while his 3.5 blocks per game would be a top 10 mark in the entire nation, as this season saw him named to both the second-team All-Conference and the SEC's All-Defensive Team. And Alabama had a dominant start to the season, losing just 1 of their first 15 games. But they cooled off as conference play ramped up, as after their 14-1 start, they would go just 9-6 the rest of the way, and finish the regular season at 23-7. They were hoping for their 4th straight conference championship, and would barely get past Florida in the quarterfinals, then would have an even closer win over Arkansas in the semis. But they ran into a wall in the tournament final versus Kentucky, losing in a blowout. Yet they would still get an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament to take on Stanford in round 1, as Horry would turn in 19 points and 9 rebounds, while adding 3 blocks in a close win that got the Tide to a second-round matchup with North Carolina. This game saw Horry go for 14 points along with 3 steals and 3 blocks. But Alabama as a whole couldn't buy a bucket, as they shot 29% from the field as a team, which led to North Carolina ending their season, as Horry's senior year had seen him average about 16 points, 8.5 rebounds, and 3.5 blocks per game. But that was it for Horry's college career, yet he had established himself as one of the most versatile players in the upcoming 1992 draft. So it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when.
With the 11th pick in the 1992 NBA draft, the Houston Rockets select Robert Horry from University of Alabama.
So the when would be the 11th pick, as Horry was selected by a Houston Rockets team who already featured one of the league's best frontcourt duos in superstar Hakeem Olajuwon and power forward Otis Thorpe. But Horry had already shown in college that he had the athleticism and the shooting range to play on the wing, and with his ability to switch and defend multiple positions effectively, he was a perfect fit for the Rockets. On top of this, the Rockets had a backcourt consisting of point guard Kenny Smith and Mad Max, aka Vernon Maxwell. So although Houston had missed the playoffs last year, they would have a full year with head coach Rudy Tomjanovich, and would show that they were a force in the West. And Horry was a part of that from day one, as he would start all season as a rookie, and would average double-figure scoring, and be the only player on the team other than Olajuwon to record a steal and a block per game. And with adding Horry's defensive versatility, the Rockets' defense, anchored by Olajuwon, became elite. They started the year slow with 2 straight losses, but recovered to win 6 in a row. Later, they took a 3-game win streak into All-Star Weekend and stretched it to 15 wins by late March, then rattled off another 11 straight wins late in the year to finish at 55-27 and make a return to the playoffs with a first-round matchup versus the Clippers. Horry had some growing pains in his playoff debut, shooting about 33% for the series and averaging 6.5 points, but he made up for it on defense, as he averaged over 1.5 steals and 2 blocks in what ended up being a 5-game series win for Houston. Round 2 brought Seattle, and you could see Horry getting more comfortable on the offensive end, as he would hit double figures in each of his first 4 games, while dishing 3.5 assists per night, and shooting over 51%. He would play poorly in a Game 5 loss, but came back in Game 6 with a very efficient 15 points, along with 7 assists and 3 steals. As Houston forced a Game 7, Horry would drop 18 points in this game with another 3 steals, and it went down to the wire, as the game was tied at 91 with about 40 seconds left. Then Horry got the ball and wrote the first chapter in the legend of Big Shot Bob, or his preferred Big Shot Rob.
2 seconds, they gotta hurry now, 1, down to goes, and Horry with just a hair left on that 24 seconds.
So with the shot clock running down, Horry would put the Rockets up by 2, but Seattle would tie it to force overtime. And unfortunately, the Rockets couldn't get it done in the extra frame, losing the game and the series, as Horry's rookie year ended with him averaging about 10 points, 5 rebounds, and a steal per game. So Houston was clearly a Western Conference contender going into the 94 season, and had only gotten better, as they had picked up point guard Sam Cassell through the draft to help their second unit offense. Horry put up very similar numbers from last year, while almost tripling the amount of 3-pointers he took, as with the offense always running through Olajuwon, and teams often doubling him, Horry was a great kick-out option on the perimeter. But you also had to be careful closing out too hard on Horry, as he could surprise you with his quickness and length in getting to the hoop. And defensively, he was again one of Houston's most impactful and versatile players, finishing second to Olajuwon in blocks. The Rockets looked unbeatable to start the season, as they came out of the gate and won their first 15. Then after 1 loss, they won 7 more. And while this type of pace wasn't sustainable all year, it got them far out in front. But at the trade deadline, Houston felt they needed to make a change, and Horry seemed to be on his way out. On February 4th, 1994, Robert Horry was included in a package sent to the Detroit Pistons, which had Houston receiving Sean Elliott in return. But when Sean Elliott's kidney issues were discovered, the Rockets would rescind the trade offer, as Horry was taken back by his sudden dealing, but at the same time knew that it was the business of basketball. So he would remain a Rocket for the season, and while it was likely a bit of an adjustment returning to the team after being traded, in the end, he was definitely happy he never left Houston, and the Rockets were able to remain near the top of the West all season, as they would finish with the conference's second best record at 58-24, and would enter the playoffs with a first-round matchup against Portland. Horry was one of Houston's top sources of offense in this series, as he came out with 16 points and 6 assists in Game 1. Then after a down Game 2, he put up 24 points and 6 assists on 10 of 13 shooting in Game 3, and followed that up with 14 points and 3 blocks in Game 4, as the Rockets had won every game to sweep the Blazers and advance to the second round to take on Phoenix. Horry had been producing well over the first 2 games of this series, as he was averaging 11.5 points, and defensively had racked up 4 steals and 5 blocks in that time. But he had shot just 36%, and the Rockets had blown leads in both games, to fall behind 0-2, as many were starting to lose their faith in the team. But the Rockets got back on track, winning their next 3, with Horry shooting over 62% in that time, and still recording 2 steals a night, but they couldn't close it out in Game 6. However, with their season on the line, Horry dropped 15 points on over 71% shooting, while adding 3 steals, as the Rockets completed the comeback in 7, and were moving on to the conference finals to face the Jazz. Horry would be quiet over the first 3 games, as he didn't hit double figures once, yet was contributing as a rebounder and defender, and the Rockets went up 2-1. Then in Game 4, Horry would stuff the stat sheet, with 11 points, 10 boards, 5 assists, 3 steals, and 2 blocks in a win. And with a trip to the finals within their grasp, Horry delivered in Game 5, with 22 points on 8 of 13 shooting, while hitting 3 shots from beyond the arc, as the Rockets were now 4 wins away from an NBA championship. Waiting for them were the New York Knicks, led by Patrick Ewing and John Starks. But Horry was having a lot of trouble finding his shot in this series, as although he scored in double figures in 4 of the first 6 games, he was only shooting about 30% from the field. But he was playing winning basketball, as he was one of Houston's top rebounders in the series, while also averaging nearly 4 assists over the first 6 games. And the teams were in a dogfight. Houston had fallen behind 3-2, but were able to force a Game 7 after a clutch Olajuwon block. Then although Horry would have just 8 points in the season's final game, he would add 3 steals, as the Rockets outlasted the Knicks to win the title, as Horry secured his first ring.
19
1994 NBA World Champion.
And his second season ended with him averaging about 10 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 1.5 steals per game. The Rockets were thinking repeat in '95 and brought back all the important pieces from last year, and everything was looking good, as Horry was giving them his usual all-around play, averaging over a steal and a block per game on defense, while giving them double-digit scoring on offense. But now his long-range shooting ability was being fully utilized, as in year 3 he would attempt 227 three-pointers and drain about 38% of them. And Houston started just like last year, as they won their first 9, but seemed like they were losing steam as the season went on. And then February hit, which would be an eventful month for the Rockets, as with the team sitting at 28-15 in early February, Maxwell would be suspended for 10 games for slapping a fan in the stands. Yet the Rockets knew they couldn't afford to lose any ground, so almost immediately, they would make a deal with Portland which saw them acquire longtime Blazers star Clyde Drexler, as he joined the team for the home stretch. And while Houston was developing chemistry over the remainder of the season, they were still able to win 19 more games, to finish with a 47-35 record and capture the 6th seed going into the playoffs. Horry came out strong in a first-round matchup with Utah, dropping 13 points in Game 1, then 21 points in Game 2, on very efficient shooting. But by Game 3, his shooting and overall usage had taken a hit, as over the remainder of the series, he only shot about 35% from the field and never again hit double figures. But just having him on the court helped give Olajuwon more room to operate and gave Drexler more clear lanes to the hoop, as the Rockets wrapped it up in 5. Waiting for them in round 2 were the Phoenix Suns, and after 2 games, it again looked like Phoenix would knock off Houston, as they were up 2-0. But an efficient 17 points from Horry in Game 3 helped them get back on track. Then Horry pulled down 17 rebounds in Game 4, but Houston lost and had their backs against the wall. However, they fought back to force a Game 7, as Horry recorded 5 blocks in Game 6. Then although he was quiet in the series-deciding game, he assisted on the biggest shot of the series.
He gets it across to Robert Horry. Horry across the line, long pass to Ellie in the corner. Ellie's got a three-pointer! Yeah!
7 seconds! Yeah!
So Houston survived, and were heading to the conference finals to take on a San Antonio Spurs team led by league MVP David Robinson. Horry was quiet throughout Game 1 and had missed all 4 of his shots, but the game was still close, and with the Rockets down 1 in the final seconds, they got the ball to Horry and knew they were in good hands.
Open man is Olajuwon. Shoot the ball. Gotta take that. Robert Horry hits the jumper. What are you waiting on? Ball, Goose. Oh, what are you waiting on? Horry's 1 of 5.
So Horry's only make of the game would give them a 1-0 series lead. Then he would come back with 21 in Game 2, as the Rockets stole both in San Antonio. The Spurs would rally to tie it, but Horry had his only double-double of the series in a Game 5 win, then helped close it out in Game 6 with 22 points, as the Rockets were returning to the finals to take on a Shaq and Penny-led Orlando Magic team, where Horry would turn in one of the great forgotten finals performances. Horry came out in Game 1 with 19 points and 8 rebounds, but it wasn't just on the offensive end, as Horry would also block 5 shots and record 3 steals. So it was a good start. Then came Game 2, and for the most part it looked like a solid performance with an 11-point, 10-rebound double-double. But then you look at the steal column, and you see that Horry had 7 of them to set an NBA Finals single-game record, as Houston took both in Orlando. Horry came out in Game 3 and dropped 20 points while pulling down 9 rebounds. Yet the game remained close, and Orlando had just brought it to within 1. But with about 15 seconds left, Olajuwon found Horry on the perimeter.
Shot clock at 6. Horry for 3!
Horry's 3 would end up icing the game for Houston, as the Rockets were 1 win away from repeating. And Horry capped off his great series with a 21-point, 13-rebound double-double while hitting 4 threes, as Houston completed the sweep and won their 2nd straight title, with Horry's season ending with him averaging about 10 points, 5 rebounds, and 1.5 steals per game. But the Rockets were aging and would look to Horry more than ever in 1996. So the team had their same core, but they were slowing down, as Drexler would miss 30 games this season. So Horry would see an even larger role, as he would record then career highs across the board, showing how complete of a player he is, finishing top 3 on the team in rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks. and his career-high 388 three-point attempts would lead the team and be a top 20 mark in the league. And this season included Horry dropping a career-high 40 points in just his 7th game. Then 2 games later, he would pull down a career-high 15 rebounds. And a late-season loss to Golden State would see him block a career-high 6 shots. So individually, Horry had never performed better. And the Rockets had been looking great. But as the season wore on, without Drexler for a lot of the final stretch, they went just 6-11 in their final 17, and finished the year at 48-34. But this was still enough for a first-round playoff matchup with the LA Lakers. Horry would have one of the worst offensive playoff performances of his career in Game 1, going scoreless on 0 for 8 shooting, but made up for it with 4 steals and 3 blocks. Then over the next 3, he averaged over 15 points while also contributing 8 total steals and 6 total blocks in that time, as the Rockets wrapped it up in 4 to move on to a second-round matchup with Seattle. The Sonics dominated the Rockets in Game 1. Then while the following 2 games were closer, Seattle still took both of them, as the Rockets' three-peat hopes were hanging on by a thread. Horry would do his best in Game 5, with 20 points, 12 rebounds, and 3 steals while draining 5 threes. But he would foul out late, as the Sonics took it in overtime to eliminate Houston, as Horry's year ended with him averaging about 12 points, 6 rebounds, and 1.5 steals per game. But Horry was entering into a contract year in '97, yet he wouldn't be playing it out in Houston. Robert Horry's most forgotten stop of his career was his time spent with the Phoenix Suns, as prior to the '97 season, he was included in a package along with Sam Cassell that landed the Rockets' Charles Barkley. But Horry's time in Phoenix was brief and tumultuous, as he appeared in 32 games while playing the lowest minutes of his career up to that point, and was constantly butting heads with head coach Danny Ainge due to his lack of playing time, with the boiling point coming after Horry was subbed out late in a January 5th loss to the Celtics, as Horry would throw a towel at Ainge out of frustration and would be suspended for it. And while this hurt Horry's reputation in the short term, it changed his legacy for the better in the long term. Just a few days after Horry's suspension, he was traded to an LA Lakers team playing their first season with superstar center Shaquille O'Neal, while also featuring some good young players in guard Nick Van Exel, swingman Eddie Jones, and a teenaged rookie named Kobe Bryant. The Lakers were sitting at 27-10 at the time of the trade, and Horry would again receive the minutes he was more accustomed to, and return to his usual all-around level of production, as he would appear in 22 games for LA and help them to a 56-26 record, leading to a first-round matchup with Portland. This would be a series to forget for Horry, as he would average less than 3 points on less than 29% shooting in a starting role, but would do a good job defensively on the Blazers' Cliff Robinson. And with Shaq turning in his usual dominance, the Lakers would still win the series in 4 games, setting up a second-round matchup with Utah. Horry again struggled this series, with one outlier coming in a 21-point performance in Game 2, as he made all 7 of his 3-point attempts. But Utah's experience and poise were too much for a younger Lakers team, as the Jazz wrapped it up in 6 games to end LA's year, with Horry's overall season seeing him average about 8 points, 4.5 rebounds, and a steal per game. And with Horry signing a 7-year deal worth $35 million shortly after the season, it was clear the Lakers had full faith in the now 27-year-old Horry. The Lakers became a premier force in the West thanks to a huge jump from Bryant in year 2, and with the Lakers adding Rick Fox, Horry would shift to power forward, where he would stay for the rest of his career. And while he would see his scoring and 3-point volume drop, his 47.6% shooting and 7.5 rebounds per game were career highs, as he spent a lot more time close to the hoop. But defensively, he remained his usual self, as the only member of the team to average at least a steal and a block per game. And with a combination of Shaq and some dynamic players on the outside, LA would be the highest scoring team in the league, and all those points would lead to them finishing with a 61-21 record, as they would again take on Portland in round 1. Horry didn't get a lot of shooting opportunities in this series, but when he did, he made them count, as he would shoot over 54%. But his impact came in everything else that he did, as he dished 4 assists per game, while averaging at least a steal and a block on defense, as LA would wrap up the series in 4, leading to a second-round matchup with Seattle. Horry was quiet over the first 2 games as he was averaging 8 points, but he broke through in Game 3 with 19 points and 4 blocks, as his final 3 games of the series saw him average 15 points and 9 rebounds on nearly 74% shooting, while also blocking nearly 3 shots per game, with the Lakers winning all 3 of those games, to take the series in 5 and advance to the conference finals for a rematch with Utah. But it would be another letdown for LA, as the whole team outside of Shaq underperformed, with Horry averaging less than 5 points on only about 36% shooting, as this year, the Jazz swept the Lakers, with Horry's year ending with him averaging about 7.5 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 1.5 steals per game. The lockout-shortened season would see the Lakers bring in more shooting to give Shaq more room to operate down low, as they would send Eddie Jones and Eldon Campbell to the Hornets mid-season for former All-Star Glenn Rice. And Kobe continued improving, as he was now a starter, but Horry would lose his starting spot, primarily coming off the bench in '99. He began the season as a starter, but then missed a couple weeks after an irregular heartbeat was detected. And when he came back, the team had a new coach in Kurt Rambis, who opted to bring Horry off the bench for the rest of the year. So Horry's minutes and contributions would be the lowest they had ever been this season. And the Lakers had started at a disappointing 7-6, but were able to salvage their season, as they would wind up finishing at 31-19, which would get them a first-round matchup with Horry's former team. Horry would be solid this series, averaging about 7 points and 6 rebounds on 50% shooting, but most importantly, he got the last laugh, scoring a series-high 12 points on 5 of 7 shooting, while adding 2 blocks in a Game 4 win, which closed out the series and pushed the Lakers through to a second-round matchup with San Antonio. But Horry would mostly be a non-factor in this series, averaging 3 points on very poor shooting, as the Lakers were swept out of the playoffs for the second straight season, with Horry's year seeing him average about 5 points, 4 rebounds, and a steal per game. But after 2 straight sweeps, and failing to make it back to the conference finals, the Lakers were active over the offseason. Los Angeles would add some veteran experience as they brought in forward AC Green and guard Ron Harper, but their most experienced veteran stayed on the bench, as they would bring Phil Jackson out of retirement to coach the team. And with Kobe becoming a full-blown star in year 4, the Lakers had everything they needed. Horry remained a backup under Jackson, and while he wasn't utilized much as a scorer in the offense, he had the passing ability to run the triangle effectively, and he still remained one of the Lakers' most versatile defenders, as well as someone who could keep the middle of the floor open. And the Lakers were a well-oiled machine under Jackson, as they just couldn't stop winning, finishing with a league-best 67-15 record, as they entered the playoffs with a first-round matchup against Sacramento. Horry wouldn't do a lot scoring-wise in this series, but he provided good rebounding relief for AC Green, and would hit 50% of his three-point shots. The Lakers won the first 2, but Sacramento fought back to tie it, but a dominant performance from LA in Game 5 would sink the Kings, as the Lakers advanced to take on Phoenix. Although Horry continued coming off the bench this series, he saw a big jump in his minutes, and was an effective perimeter shooter for the Lakers, as he shot nearly 42% from deep, and would hit double figures in 2 games, while averaging nearly 2 steals per game, as the Lakers again won in 5. But their next test would be their toughest, as they met the Portland Trail Blazers in the conference finals. Horry came out with 12 points off the bench in a big Game 1 win, but over his next 5, he was ice cold, as he would shoot 25% from the field and make just 1 of his 15 three-point attempts. And the Lakers' season was in jeopardy, as after taking a 3-1 lead, they had let Portland come back and even the series. And it wasn't looking good in Game 7, as Portland was up 15 at the beginning of the 4th quarter. But the Lakers would find a way to come back and completely swing momentum after a big alley-oop from Kobe to Shaq. And with Horry hitting 3 of 4 free throws in the final 20 seconds to close it out, the Lakers broke through and were heading to the NBA Finals for the first time in a decade. At this point, while Horry continued to come off the bench, he was getting starter-level minutes, and his threat as a long-range shooter kept the key just a little less crowded for Shaq to completely dominate. But Horry would have his own moments, as his 17 points on 60% shooting in a Game 4 that went to overtime would help the Lakers go up 3-1. Then although they couldn't finish it in Game 5, it worked out, as they closed out the Pacers in Game 6 in LA to win the title in front of the home crowd and get Horry his 3rd ring, as his season ended with him averaging about 5.5 points, 5 rebounds, and a steal per game. The Lakers brought in another veteran forward for the 0-1 season, as this year, Horry was backing up Horace Grant, but Horry would have one of the worst overall shooting seasons of his career, as he shot below 39% from the field, yet he still shot nearly 35% from deep, with nearly half of his total shots coming from beyond the arc. The Lakers weren't able to run through teams at the rate that they had last year, but they were still a force, and had caught fire at the right time, as they won 8 straight to end the season. And while they hadn't displayed the same level of regular season dominance as last year, it turned out they were just saving it for the playoffs. A first-round series with Portland would see Horry average less than 3 points on below 18% shooting, but it really didn't matter, as these Blazers didn't pose the same challenge as last year, and with 2 superstars leading them, LA easily swept Portland. Round 2 brought the Kings, and Horry again put up modest scoring numbers, yet shot much more efficiently, and on the defensive end, he averaged 3 steals, and his 11-point Game 4 helped the Lakers get the win and complete another sweep. The conference finals brought the Spurs, and some of the Lakers still had revenge on their minds for the 1999 loss. But Horry's shot remained lost in this series, as he only shot about 23% from the field, but he still helped keep the defense honest, and when he was on defense, he was averaging nearly 2 steals and 2 blocks, while also pulling down over 8 rebounds a night, as the Lakers put an exclamation mark on this series, winning the final 2 games by an average victory margin of 34 points, as they continued their historic postseason with their 3rd consecutive sweep, and it looked like they were on the road to perfection. But an Allen Iverson-led Sixers team would give them their first blemish, as they were upset in Game 1 of the NBA Finals on their home court, but they would tie it in Game 2. Then Game 3 would be Horry's best, as he would drop 15 points, including hitting all 3 of his shots from beyond the arc, and he again came up clutch with less than a minute left.
So they get the ball out of Kobe Bryant's hands, but Horry hits from downtown. And then
as he would hit a 3 to put the Lakers up by 4, then hit free throws to ice the game, as the Lakers went up 2-1. Then LA followed this up with 2 more convincing wins, as they capped off one of the most dominant postseasons in NBA history with their 2nd consecutive title, as Horry ended the year averaging about 5 points, 3.5 rebounds, and half a steal per game. 2002 would see Horry backing up Samaki Walker, but his overall minutes would be his highest since 1998, and it would lead to some of his best production in years. And the Lakers as a whole looked like they still had a lot left in the tank, beginning the year at 16-1, but as the season went on, they looked like they were starting to run out of gas. Yet Horry's ability to do a little bit of everything helped the Lakers immensely, as he was one of their best rebounders and defenders, and would even finish top 10 in 6th Man of the Year voting. And while the Lakers had lost a bit of steam, they were still the championship favorites, and wrapped up the regular season at 56-26, and got a first-round matchup with Portland. The series would once again end in a sweep for LA, and while Horry didn't have huge contributions, he still filled the stat sheet. And even though Game 3 was his worst shooting performance, there was still no hesitation from Kobe in getting Horry the ball with about 2 seconds left, with a chance to win the series.
Bryant ditching off. Horry for 3.
So Horry's shot would win the game, and the Lakers would advance to a 2nd-round matchup with San Antonio. And while it wouldn't be a sweep this season, the Lakers were still able to get through the Spurs pretty handily. Horry gave the team solid scoring and rebounding, while hitting 50% of his shots from deep. And after 2 games, with the series tied, Horry was inserted into the starting lineup, and the Lakers would win their next 3 to take it in 5. But now the Lakers had to get through the Sacramento Kings. This would be Horry's best series of the postseason, as after an 18-point performance in a Game 1 win, he would pull down 20 rebounds in a Game 2 loss. But after a poor shooting performance from Horry in Game 3, he and the Lakers found themselves down 2-1. Horry came back in Game 4 with 18 points on over 71% shooting, along with 14 rebounds. Yet as the clock ticked down, the Lakers were in danger of falling behind 3-1. But after a fight for a rebound in the final seconds, the ball eventually came to Horry at the top of the arc, with the Lakers down 2.
Putting a move on Christie. Rebound O'Neal. Coming up short. Horry for the win.
So Horry had won the game in what has become one of the most famous shots of his career, and really built the legend of Big Shot Rob. But the celebration was short-lived, as the Kings got back on track with a Game 5 win. Then came Game 6, and while this game has gone down as arguably the most controversial in NBA history, the Lakers weren't complaining, as they got the win to force a Game 7. And with Horry chipping in 16 points and 12 rebounds in the series decider, the Lakers would outlast the Kings in overtime and return to the NBA Finals. The finals would be much easier for Horry and the Lakers, as the New Jersey Nets had no answer for Shaq. And while Horry didn't put up any crazy numbers on offense, he made his impact on the defensive end, averaging nearly 3 steals and 2 blocks. And his 12 points in Game 4 would help the Lakers get the win and complete the sweep. But more importantly, achieve a three-peat, as Horry got one for the thumb, and his season had seen him average about 7 points, 6 rebounds, and a steal per game. The Lakers finally looked to be slowing down in 0-3, as they wouldn't get their record above 500 until their 47th game, as it had many believing that the dynasty was over. But just when it seemed like you could count them out, they caught fire, with Horry again providing valuable two-way contributions and acting as one of the team's best rebounders. And after a 24-23 start, they would go 26-9 the rest of the way, to finish at 50-32 and make a return to the playoffs to take on Minnesota in the first round. Horry had 8 rebounds and 8 assists in a big Game 1 win, but after a blowout loss in Game 2, Jackson made Horry a starter for the rest of the postseason, and by Game 5, the teams were tied at 2 games. But over the next 2 games, Horry hit double figures in both and averaged 4.5 assists, as the Lakers won them convincingly to wrap it up in 6, and move on to a matchup with San Antonio. Horry was pretty quiet over the first 4 games, and while his shot wasn't falling, he was pulling down nearly 9 rebounds a night in that time, and the teams were tied. Then Game 5 came, and even though Horry had again been cold, the Lakers went to him in the final seconds with a chance to win the game.
Here's Horry for 3! Robinson with the rebound that was in and out!
But what had become almost a certainty for him at this point didn't happen, as the shot didn't fall and the Lakers fell behind 3-2. And then a couple nights later, the Spurs knocked them off their throne with a blowout win, as Horry's season ended with him averaging about 6.5 points, 6.5 rebounds, and a steal per game. But Horry's contract was up, and he'd have a new home come the following season. In late July, it was announced that Horry had signed with the San Antonio Spurs, as although the Lakers were his first choice, he would say that they never offered him a contract. So he moved on to another championship contender, giving the Spurs a great backup power forward to give relief minutes to Tim Duncan. And with young, talented backcourt players in point guard Tony Parker and the rapidly improving Manu Ginobili, the Spurs were clear contenders. A now 33-year-old Horry would see his minutes and numbers drop in San Antonio, but he was there to play a role, and he played it well, giving the Spurs good floor spacing and post defense, as they featured the league's top defense, and would ride that to a 57-25 record and a first-round matchup with Memphis. And while Horry came off the bench this series, he was playing like he was a starter, as he shot over 61% from the field, hit double figures in 3 games, and averaged over 8 rebounds, in what ended up being a Spurs sweep. But it was only right that the following round brought the Lakers. Yet it seemed that Horry had used up all his offense versus Memphis, as he would average less than 3 points for the series and shoot a combined 4 for 17 from the field. And this year, the Lakers came out on top, as they won in 6, with Horry's season ending with him averaging about 5 points, 3.5 rebounds, and half a steal per game. Horry was given more minutes in 05 and responded with improved offensive production for a Spurs team still led by their talented trio and still boasting the league's top defense, as they would finish the season at 59-23 and make a return to the playoffs with a first-round matchup against Denver. Horry would play a great first-round series, shooting over 51% from the field and averaging 10 points, as the Spurs won in 5. Round 2 brought Seattle, and while Horry's shot wasn't falling for most of the series, he would go for 14 points in Game 6 to help the Spurs clinch it, and move on to a conference finals matchup with league MVP Steve Nash and the Phoenix Suns. Horry would have ups and downs in this series, but would average over 10 points and drain 9 3-pointers, in what ended up being a 5-game series win, as Horry was making his return to the finals, this time to take on the defending champion Pistons. Horry's first 4 games were solid, and he continued to be a long-range threat whenever he was on the floor, but overall he was shooting below 35%, yet the series was tied. But next was Game 5, and after 3 quarters, Horry had hit just one shot, yet the Spurs were up by one. But then in the fourth quarter, Horry came alive, going 4 for 5 from the field for 13 points to keep the Spurs in the game, as he had one stretch with 7 straight points. But the teams were deadlocked and needed overtime, and Horry remained hot in the extra frame.
Horry drives all the way in and with a left hand with a dunk, and he gets fouled as well.
First, turning back the clock with a huge dunk to bring the Spurs to within 2. Then about a minute and a half later, with the score unchanged, Horry would change it in the final seconds.
Hunter on Parker. Here's Ginobili. To Horry for 3. Oh, unbelievable. This guy is off the charts.
A defensive lapse from Rasheed Wallace left Horry open for what ended up being the game-winning shot, as Horry cemented himself as one of the most clutch players of all time, and the Spurs went up 3-2. Then after dropping Game 6, Horry would chip in 15 points in Game 7, as the Spurs outlasted the Pistons to win the title, as Horry now had 6. And his season ended with him averaging about 6 points, 3.5 rebounds, and a steal per game. Horry and the Spurs came back in 06, hoping to repeat, and had everything they needed to do so, with Horry again acting as one of many important players in the Spurs rotation, contributing to their top 2 defense, while helping them finish with the West's best record at 63-19, as they would get a first-round matchup with Sacramento. Horry would come off the bench for the first 4 games, as the teams were knotted up at 2. But after that, Horry would become a starter, and would average 4 assists over the final 2 games, as the Spurs won both to advance to a second-round matchup with Dallas. Horry would start the first 2 games of this series, but after the Spurs dropped both, he again began coming off the bench, and really saw minutes decrease over the rest of the series, as the Spurs would push it to 6 before losing, as Horry's year ended with him averaging about 5 points, 4 rebounds, and half a steal per game. Horry would see his minutes drop in 07 in an attempt to keep him fresher for the playoffs, and with guys like Francisco Elson and Fabrizio Oberto, the Spurs had depth in the front court, and with their star trio still going strong, they remained one of the league's top teams with its best defense, as they would finish with a 58-24 record and get a first-round matchup with Denver. Horry would play great in Game 1 with 14 points, yet the Nuggets would steal the game. Then although Horry hit double figures just one more time in the series, he was very efficient, and the Spurs would win in 5, setting up a second-round matchup with Phoenix. Horry again had a good Game 1, but was fading as the series went on, as by Game 4 he was scoreless, and maybe this was frustrating him, along with the fact that the Spurs were heading towards a loss. So late in the game, with Steve Nash bringing the ball up, Horry made his most notable play of the series.
And here is Nash being chased, and they had look out.
So Horry's hip check would get him ejected, and eventually suspended for 2 games. But during the aftermath, multiple Suns left the bench area, including all-NBA forward Amare Stoudemire, who would draw a 1-game suspension, as Phoenix would fall behind 3-2 without their star, then lose the series a couple nights later, as San Antonio was moving on to a conference finals matchup with Utah. Horry played solid minutes in this series, but was mostly a non-factor, as San Antonio would pull off a convincing 5-game win, as they were returning to the NBA Finals to take on a young LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Horry was again not much of a factor as a scorer, but he contributed in every other way, made most evident by his Game 2 stat line of 5 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, and 5 blocks. And the Cavs were no match for the Spurs, as they were swept, and Horry added another ring to the collection, bringing his total to 7, with his season seeing him average about 4 points, 3.5 rebounds, and half a steal per game. Horry was back for year 16, and the Spurs were thinking repeat, but Horry really started breaking down this season, as he would only manage 45 games due to nagging injuries. But the Spurs didn't look like they were slowing down, as their top 3 defense led them to a 56-26 record and a first-round matchup with Phoenix. Horry would avoid suspension this series, but he also avoided the court, as he appeared in 4 of 5 games at about 8 minutes a night. But the Spurs won in 5 and were set to take on New Orleans in round 2. Horry would again have a minimal role as a young Hornets team pushed the Spurs to the brink, but they were still able to hold on and win in 7, as they were making a return to the conference finals to take on a revamped Lakers team. Horry again saw limited minutes, appearing in 4 of 5 games. But this time the Spurs were outplayed, as the Lakers would take the series to end their season, with Horry's year seeing him average about 2.5 points, 2.5 rebounds, and half a steal per game. And this would be the end of the road for Robert Horry, as he would walk away from the game as a 7-time champion, and in more recent years, would shift his focus to improving healthcare for all Americans. Robert Horry is one of the most clutch players in sports history, a guy that you always felt comfortable with taking the last shot, no matter how many shots he had missed before that, and overall one of the best role players in sports history, with 7 rings to prove it. But he seems to only get credit as a clutch performer, and while clutch shooting leads to winning, Horry's entire playstyle led to winning. A guy that rebounded, played defense, and accepted any role is a coach's dream, and that's who Robert Horry was. But on the flip side, he always needs to be mentioned among the game's most clutch players, as arguably more than anyone, he made his shots count, and stuck countless daggers into the hearts of many NBA fans. And whether you call him Big Shot Bob or Big Shot Rob, one thing everyone will call him is a winner, through and through. But that's it for today's episode on Robert Horry. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on one of his Houston Rockets teammates, or this one on a guy he teamed up with at Alabama. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.